Hi friends, welcome back to part 2 of CVC2 Anatomy and Physiology. At this point we're going to start looking at the muscular system, and then the second half of this session we're going to be looking at the nervous system. These are just overviews, so it's a summary of what you've already learned from your ebooks online. So feel free to come back to this at any time, take some notes throughout it, and stop and pause as you feel fit. But let's get going, team. We have three types of muscle in the body. The one that we're most worried about is, as a personal trainer, is our skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle allows us to move the body and it pulls up on the skeletal system. It is highly fatigable, but it is very, very strong at the source of it. We also have cardiac muscle. This can be found in our hearts. It has got a built-in rhythm, and it's also involuntary. So this means that we can't consciously control this one. It's very fatigue resistant as well, which is very important because you don't want your heart to fatigue. And then we've got smooth muscle. Smooth muscle makes up a lot of our glands and organs, such as our stomach. It's very elastic, so if you had a big Christmas dinner or a big birthday buffet, you can imagine your stomach stretching out to accommodate that food. And this is a beautiful thing about smooth muscle. They're very fatigue resistant as well, and they are also involuntary muscles. But like I said, the ones that we are most focused on are the skeletal muscles, because these are the ones that we control most of all by the brain and as personal trainers. The functions of the skeletal muscle is, number one, to generate heat. So imagine when you're cold and what happens. You're out in a snow blizzard, which happens almost nowhere in Australia, but imagine you're walking down the streets from New York and the snow starts coming down. The first thing that your body's probably going to do is start getting cold. You shiver. And as you start shivering, the muscles are contracting rapidly. This produces heat as a byproduct and helps maintain our normal body temperature. It also helps us maintain posture. So standing up or sitting upright, it allows us to pull ourselves up against gravity and reduce stresses on joints too. And of course, it allows for movement. So skeletal muscle pulls on bones to create movements such as flexion and extension, or flexion and extension at the shoulder. Origins and insertions are where 2 points of the muscle either originate or insert into bones. The origin of a muscle is generally something that is more proximal on a still part, so something that doesn't move, where the insertion of the muscle will be more distal and it'll be on the moving part of a bone. So let's take this bicep for example. It originates here at the top, it goes over the humerus and also onto the humerus. It attaches up here to the scap as well. But it comes all the way down to the radius and inserts into the radius there. The bicep causes flexion of the elbow, and this will be the movement through the radius here. So the origin is the humerus and the scapula. The insertion point is the radius. And the radius is the bit that moves with the bicep. So team, let's have a look at the origin and insertion of the pectoralis major. So the pectoralis major, let's see if I can get this right. So bear with me. So the pectoralis major comes across the clavicle, comes down the sternum and attaches down here to the ribs. So the origin of this, feel down here at the medial 2/3 or the medial third, especially of your clavicle, you'll feel a nice meaty part. That is one of the origins of the pectoralis major. Feel down the sternum, you're going to feel the origin or the sternal origins of the pectoralis major. And then mostly in males and females, you won't be able to feel this, but you'll feel underneath where the origin of the pectoralis major is down at the ribs. Everyone stick out your arm. You will be able to feel the outside of the armpit, and this nice meaty part is the fibers of the pectoralis major, and you'll be able to feel that go all the way up into here, which is the humerus. Now this is the insertion part of the pectoralis major, and the insertion attaches to the humerus deep underneath the deltoid. Did everyone feel that? It's a fantastic muscle, and we can work that one quite a lot through things like push-ups and bench press. Properties of a muscle, remember that they are EC. Okay, that's not my accent, they are EC, E-C-E-E. So one of the properties is that they're excitable. So a muscle can be excited by responding and receiving stimuli. That means my brain can send out information, comes down to my bicep, and it goes, hey, I want you to flex your elbow. So it creates that movement. So it's excitable. It receives stimuli or receives information, and it gets excited to do something. They also have the ability to contract. So again, using my bicep, it has the ability to contract underneath force. So let's say I was picking up something and I had to lift it up. That's going to create contractility. Extensibility means it's the reverse of contract. So it means that it can extend out and lengthen while stretching and not actually cause any damage. And elasticity, if we stretch muscles out, they're like a rubber band, they'll come back to their resting shape. Don't forget these properties because they're very important going forward. 3 types of contractions that a muscle can do are isometric, concentric, and eccentric. So an isometric contraction is where there's tension underneath the muscle or tension in the muscle, but there's no change in shortening or lengthening of the muscle. An isometric contraction would be an example of a plank, where we're holding our bodies in an ab exercise, but the body's not moving, except maybe a little bit of shaking. We're holding the body nice and strong to keep ourselves taut. There is tension in our core, but the body's essentially not moving. Another example might be a wall squat. So if I was to push up against the wall behind me and sink down into a squat, that would be an isometric contraction. So again, through here, if I do a bicep curl, if I put some pressure through here, I've got tension in the bicep. However, it's not moving at any time. It is an isometric contraction. So it's not lengthening or shortening. Concentric contractions is where we've got force in the muscle and it is shortening under tension. So a bicep curl or a concentric contraction would be when the bicep is contracting under tension. Eccentric is the other way. So eccentric contraction is against the force, or the muscle lengthens while it's still under tension. So let's say I'm doing a squat. As I come up against gravity and I've got a barbell on my back, it means that I will be going through the concentric contraction. My muscles are creating force to lift that barbell up. As I go back down, gravity is actually going to pull me down, but the muscles have to stay taut to actually allow control through that movement to prevent damage in my body. This is the eccentric contraction of the muscle. So this is where the muscle is lengthening out, but it still has tension within it. And think about it when you're doing this movement next time. The muscles are always stronger in the eccentric loading contraction of an exercise. When we start looking at overcoming resistance, we need to think about the types of resistance that we use in the body. And the types of resistance we use on the body in exercise programs are essentially determined by the client's training ability and training age. Some examples are body weight, machine weights, free weights, resistance bands, chains, medicine balls. There's countless things that you can be doing. When we start overcoming resistance, we start looking at a thing called hypertrophy. So hypertrophy is the term we give to muscle growth over time. And as we increase muscle growth, the hypertrophy increases. And this allows a lot of different aspects to change in the body. We can get strength gains, we can get more fat loss, and it allows the body to be a lot more efficient as well. There are 2 main types of resistance exercises that we look at: isolated and compound. Isolated exercises usually target one joint or one muscle group. A compound exercise will target 2 or more joints or 2 or more muscle groups. An example of a compound exercise would be a push-up. So in a push-up, I've got my shoulder working as I come through this movement here, and I've got my elbow working at the same time. We've also got the pectoralis major working, and then we've got the tricep working as I extend out. The isolation movement that works through the chest would be a chest fly. So let's take the elbow out of it and just work through the shoulder. So in a chest fly, it's when the shoulder comes through, but the elbow stays still. See that? So that would be an isolated movement because only one joint is moving at this point in time. For our beginner exercises, we want to focus on more compound movements because they are more efficient and replicate activities of daily living. The roles of muscle come under 4 different ways. When we look at the function in movement, the prime mover is known as the agonist. I think of the agonist as the engine that creates the car to move. So the agonist is the prime mover of that movement. Let's take this picture here. We have a bicep curl happening. Imagine a dumbbell through the hand. As the arm comes up, the bicep drives that movement known as the agonist. However, the body doesn't like to hurt itself, and it has a lot of workplace health and safety functions in play. The muscles on the opposite side just don't come along for the ride. They will actually act as the antagonist or the braking system to say, hey, slow down, you're going too fast. Now, in beginner exercises, antagonist muscles can fire, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we hit nervous system. Fixators, these are my stabilizing muscles that are going to hold joints together during exercises. And my synergists are helper muscles. So they may not be the prime movers, but they're going to assist this big muscle to help bring this arm up as well. So an example of that would be something like the brachialis, which is down deep here. Hands up who stretches and who needs to probably do a bit more stretching. Stretching is an important part for muscle health as we train and as we work with muscle strength and hypertrophy. As you can see here, we need to be stretching to increase joint range of movement. We need to decrease risk of injury through stretching as well. It also helps us enhance our posture, reduces muscle tension and joint stress. It increases blood and nutrient supply to the muscles, which also assists with healing of microscopic muscle tears, especially in those times of DOMS. Okay, we all know what that DOMS feels like, I'm sure. It also promotes relaxation and reduces stress. I'm sure after a big stretch session, you feel so much more relaxed, especially if you've just done a high intensity training session as well. These are all the selling points of stretching for your clients, and they should be included in your programs, either at the start and at the end of your programs, and even a couple of days a week to assist with recovery for your clients. Your stretches should be done when your muscles are warm. You should be doing stretches before your exercise programs, and this would be dynamic stretching, also known as range of movement stretching. It should be also done as post-exercise, so static stretches at the end of your workout. This is where you're going to hold the stretch, such as a tricep stretch, like so. You should be doing stretches 2 to 3 times a week. And you can also incorporate stretching classes such as yoga or Tai Chi to help actually get your clients stretching appropriately as well. Some acute or very quick adaptations to flexibility training. We can reduce muscle tension. So if you've got really, really tight muscles during training, we can reduce that tension, and it helps restore range of movement, which will help in a session as well. Over the long term, however, we get a progressive elongation of muscle fascia, which allows a lengthening of muscles, but also a better posture over time. So team, when should static stretches be performed? Have a think about this, pause the recording, and when you're ready, Press play and see if your answer is correct. How'd you go? Static stretching should be done in the cool down. So it should be done after you brought the heart rate down, after you brought the blood pressure down. Your static stretching should be done there. So if you've got B, well done, team. Let's rock and roll into the next part, the nervous system. The nervous system is, again, just an overview, and the more nitty-gritty stuff can be found in your ebooks. So feel free to go back to that at any time. So let's jump into it, and it's broken down into two major parts: the central nervous system, the brain, and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, so everything that comes off the spinal cord. So these will be my afferent and efferent nerves, also known as my motor and sensory nerves. Sensory organs allow us to take information back from our periphery to the central nervous system. So we will be able to take things on board such as pain, pressure, heat and cold, touch, and proprioception. Ever touch something that's really, really cold or really, really hot? You touch it and that information goes back to the brain to go, hey, that's really hot, take your hand off of it. We'll talk about stretch reflexes reflex arcs in a little bit. The CNS or central nervous system constantly receives sensory feedback to keep our body aware of its surroundings, but also keep us alert over time. Motor nerves then carry information from the central nervous system back to the body. So let's say I touch something hot, bang, it's really, really hot. I understand that. My motor nerves carry information down to my arm to say, pull away, that's going to cause damage to my hands. This is a workplace health and safety component of the body to keep our body out of harm's way. There are two main sensory organs for movement, and these are the muscle spindles and the Golgi tendon organs. So first up, the muscle spindle. This detects stretch in a muscle belly. So you'll find the muscle spindle in the muscle belly, and I like to think of the muscle spindle as a little spring that goes around the muscle fiber. And as the muscle fiber elongates, it's going to stretch out the spring, sending that information back to my brain and back to my my spinal cord to say, hey, this is causing me possible damage. I need to contract back. That information of too much stretch goes back to the spinal cord, gets flicked straight back out to the muscle belly, and it goes, hey bro, come on back. We need to relax, okay? So the muscle will actually start contracting to take away too much stretch. This is also known as the stretch reflex, and you'll be able to see this when you're stretching muscles. You start getting that shaking component as well. The other side, if we've got one for stretch, we need one for contraction. So the Golgi tendon organ, or the GTO, is found in the neuromuscular junction. So this is where the muscle and the tendon, the musculotendinous junction, the muscle and the tendon come together. Now, I like to think of it as the Golgi tendon organ goes between the muscle fibers, locks in like so, and as I contract through the muscle, it squeezes on this organ out. That sends information back to the spinal cord again, telling the brain that it's too much tension in the muscle. This is going to cause damage. I need to now relax that muscle. And it will actually send a co-response to the antagonist muscle, remember the opposite muscle on the joints, to actually cause them to start to contract as well. So let's say I'm doing a bicep curl and I'm causing too much tension in the bicep. The information goes back to the spinal cord to say there is too much tension here. I need you guys to relax, but a second response goes to the tricep underneath to go, you need to start contracting to release some of that tension. Have a go with a leg extension if it is safe to do so. You'll find under heavy load, you won't be able to extend your knees all the way out because of the amount of force that goes through your quadriceps because of this organelle here. When we start looking at how everything comes together, we look at the neuromuscular integration. And this is also known as the motor unit. It starts off at the motor nerve, sending information down the cell body through the axon and through the axon terminal. This goes across the neuromuscular junction into the muscle fiber, and then causes something, whether it will be inhibition or excitation of that fiber. So the motor nerve is the full neuron here. The motor end plate is where the motor nerve connects to the muscle fiber. And then we look at the muscle fibers, and these are all the fibers that are connected to that motor nerve. Okay. There are 3 types of muscle fiber in the body. Okay. One which we call type 1, and then one we separate into type 2A and type 2B fibers. Type 1 fibers are slow twitch fibers. These are heavily oxidative. They use a lot of oxygen and have a lot of blood supply. They're generally smaller in size, but very endurable. Type 2A are fast oxidative glycolytic fibers. These are somewhat fatigable. They are intermediate in all aspects. So intermediate in size, intermediate in endurance and strength. These ones here at the end, type 2B fibers, these are fast glycolytic fibers or fast twitch fibers. Now my fast twitch or type 2B fibers are usually anaerobic, so don't use oxygen. These will be looked at as these ones here in a microscope. So they'll actually have very little blood supply because they are so anaerobic in nature. These are usually larger in size and create a huge amount of force, but they fatigue really easily as well. So when we compare these 2 types of muscles, the fast twitch have a very fast contraction, whereas the slow twitch is very slow to contract. You think about a 100-meter sprinter, very big muscles, very fast, but a marathon runner, very slow, very steady. When we look at the strength of a fast twitch fiber, this is very, very high, whereas the slow twitch fiber is very low in strength. The endurance for a fast twitch fiber, it doesn't have a lot of endurance at all. In fact, it really fatigues quite quickly, and a slow twitch can go on and on and on as long as we keep feeding it. And the size of a fast twitch fiber, these are huge, okay? They're very, very big muscles compared to my slow twitch fibers, which are very, very small. You have a look at the Olympics. This is where you'll see your 100-meter sprinters that are very, very fast, very, very strong, but they can only go for a couple of seconds at that speed. You go to a marathon runner, same sort of movement at a lower intensity, but higher in the type 1 fibers and smaller bodies in general with those athletes. So team, that comes to the end of our overview of the muscular system and the nervous system, and hopefully it's all starting to come together and make sense. Take down any notes that you need to, and don't be afraid to get a hold of your coach on your campus to ask any questions that you may need. If you're ready to rock and roll, team, I'll see you in part 3 to finalize our CVC2 on anatomy and physiology. See you there.